Do you know what AYSOS means? Most parents don't. It's online shorthand for "Are you stupid or something?", a message most kids don't want to receive. Parents can find this definition in the Parent's Guide to Internet Slang on the Erase Bullying website. With over 35 links to resources, the Erase Bullying website also serves as a portal connecting parents and youth to a broad range of programs, organizations, and information. Parents and youth will have access to vital information on bullying. It lists the risk factors and warning signs so parents know exactly what to watch out for. And there are tips for parents to learn how to talk to children about bullying. Youth can find information on what to do if they're being bullied, or if they've witnessed bullying. And there's special information on youth suicide, how to talk to your friends who need help, and what to do if you need help. The website links to a new online reporting tool, an easy-to-use, secure, and anonymous way for targets and witnesses to report a bullying incident. Choosing to report bullying is not an easy decision for a child to make, especially if they fear retaliation from their peers. They need a safe place where they can anonymously report bullying when and where they want. The Erase Bullying reporting tool helps to meet that need. It can be accessed from any smartphone, mobile device, or from the privacy of a home computer. The first thing that students see when they go to the online tool is a reminder that if this is an emergency, to call 911, or if they need immediate help, to seek out a trusted adult or contact the Children's Helpline. A student then begins to file a report by entering their city and school. This is essential information to ensure the correct school-safe coordinator is alerted. The student is then asked to identify the type of bullying, verbal, physical, social, or cyber, and a general description of the incident. On the next screen, the information is more specific and completely optional. Students fill out as much information as they are comfortable with. They can include their name, the location and date of the incident, or their contact information. Any information collected is solely for the school district and protected by the BC privacy legislation. Once the student sends the report, a school-safe coordinator receives an alert. The coordinator will assess the details included in the report and decide the best course of action. A child will only be contacted if they have indicated that they want to be contacted. The coordinator will choose the best course of action for each incident. They will alert school principals or reach out to police or other community partners to address the specific incident. With a centralized view, the coordinator will identify trends, monitor hotspots, and use the data to help focus prevention strategies where they are needed most. Some secrets aren't worth keeping. The Erase Bullying reporting tool makes it easier for students to take a stand against bullying.
Hey, loser.
Leave me alone.
When a child shares hurtful comments online, that's bullying. Visit erasebullying.ca to learn how to help your child stand up to cyberbullying.
Attempt for a webinar to provide some mentoring assistance to our colleagues in Wyoming, and we've invited our extension colleagues from across the nation to join us through e-extension. My name is Mary Martin. I am located in Jackson, Wyoming, and today I would like to share with you some of the things that I have learned about conflict. And the topic today is conflict and the culture of avoidance in the workplace. My colleague Bill Taylor is helping me. This is my first attempt to actually host a LINC program. The University of Wyoming has moved to the platform of LINC for its online webinars, and I've been having a hiccup in the system because I'm on a county server, and their firewalls have had us do some interesting dances with conflict with technology to try to get myself able to do the programs. But we do know that when we look at conflicts, it's more than just a mere disagreement. Common causes of conflict include unclear expectations, change, insecurity, and possibly the need for control. Conflict avoidance is a self-protective technique that we employ either because we've lacked the the professional or the personal skills to deal with conflict, or we may be lacking the self-confidence to engage in a constructive discussion that we are fearful of, and maybe we don't feel comfortable in knowing how to do the negotiation strategies. But there are signs that there's conflict avoidance happening in the workplace. They are both verbal and nonverbal, and we will be looking at some of those today. Conflict avoidance tendencies successfully sweep arguments under the rug for the time being, but that strategy is only going to be short-lived because conflicts will tend to resurface within your relationships or your organizations. Today's session, I'll do an overview of conflict. We'll look at what conflict avoidance looks like in the workplace, some of the consequences that we will find are going to be happening to us should we be choosing to use the stance of avoiding conflict. And then I'm also going to share with you some strategies which you can start developing to help you to overcome avoiding conflict and to begin managing it. Conflicts occur when there's a perception that our needs, our concerns, or our interests are being threatened. Generally, the disagreement is at some level between two people. There can be more than two parties, and they can often be more than two people involved with it. But generally, what's wrong is there's a difference between what is truly happening and what is perceived to be happening, and that is what tends to create misunderstandings and that start to exaggerate as we perceive that there's disagreements in our needs being met, our concerns being met, or our interests being valued. So if we can understand the true area of the disagreement, and I will talk a little bit later about that's one of the strategies we have to look at, what's perceived and what's true. There's also the concept of you've got parties involved, and I'm sure that many of you that are in extension are surprised sometimes to find out that you're in the middle of a conflict that you didn't even realize existed. And the other side that we often have in extension is that there is a conflict brewing and we should be in it and we're being avoided because the rules are going to be changed and are going to be enforced upon us, or people haven't thought that they needed to include the person that's the manager of the program in discussing how they're going to be changing their interests or their needs, or if they're not going to win, particularly if you work with 4-H and you're dealing with parents who are living vicariously through their children. You have those interests that are at play within those programs. The other thing that we see that happens is that you have perceived threats. Rather than it's a true threat, we need to be aware that in perception there are filters that are at play when people come to us with a conflict. And here's where I was going to try to do a poll, and let's see if I can pull off this poll. Oops, Bill, I need to find my poll. So I'm going to take a second and let me know which of these do you see that are perceptional filters in a conflict, or could be a perceptional filter? I'm seeing that we're getting votes a little bit all over the place, and I'm going to stop sharing here and try to get back into the slides. They're all perception filters that we need to be aware of. Culture, race, and ethnicity influence the beliefs that we hold about our social structures. They can play a role in conflict. Gender and sexuality, we need to be very aware that men and women perceive situations somewhat differently, based both on their experiences in the world, which relates to power and privilege, and also in how we perceive relationships or procedures. And it's not necessarily so much a gender issue, although oftentimes the relationship piece is related to the female gender. But if you look at the personality styles, if people perceive relationships to be very important, they will step away from rules and procedures or tasks. And so those can be a filter that are playing in the perception of the conflict. Knowledge. If people respond to conflict based on their past experiences or the knowledge that they have on the issue at hand. If you get somebody that knows a lot about horses, they will feel that they're bringing more to a conflict regarding a horse show than if you wind up with an agent that doesn't have a horse background. And so that can be a perceptional filter that's at play with that conflict. You also have a perceptional issue that's at play, and that's what people think about the messenger. So if you are perceived as the messenger to be powerful, some of us old tenured extension educators, we just have power by virtue of having been around for a while. And you get the new kid on the block and they're perceived to not know anything, and so we can roll over the top of the newbie. And that can be a perception filter, just because how they are perceiving the messenger that's bringing it. And then we also have to consider that previous and past life experiences are perception filters that are going to be at play in this conflict. We may be fearful, we may be lacking in trust, we may be reluctant to take on that particular topic again because we got burnt the last time we addressed it, or we wound up in a really negative situation that we had no idea why we got there. And so if our previous experience has been unpleasant, or if our previous experience has been, if I come with a big stick and beat on you, I'll get my way, that's perception that people have, that that's how I deal with conflict. It's kind of a bullying perspective, and they continue that behavior until they learn that that's not a behavior that's going to be accepted. So as we're looking at the needs, the issues, and the concerns that people are bringing in avoiding conflict, we also need to remember that there are these perception filters that are having a huge play in the conflict. I'm seeing something's being typed, and Bill, you'll tell me if it's something I need to notice. There's a tendency for us to want to narrowly define a problem as one of substance or task or a probability. Workplace conflicts, however, tend to be more complex than that because they involve ongoing relationships, and they have a complex emotional component. And I don't believe that we often think about the emotional component that's at play in the workplace. There's always a procedural side to a workplace conflict. There's psychological needs that are going to need to be addressed within that conflict. And there's also a substantive or something of substance that's involving in that conflict in the workplace. So we've got an emotional piece, we have the substance, we have psychological, and we are also going to be seeing that you're in a workplace where you're trying to have ongoing relationships. So that's creating a whole smorgasbord of filters and components that we need to be aware of as we go into working on people's conflicts. This past county fair, we have a brand new 4-H educator here in Teton County, and she got herself, she had been on the job for maybe 5 weeks, and it was now fair time, and she was meeting with a dad and a beef member. The beef member had not attended enough meetings to be able to show at the livestock sale, and the child was not going to be being allowed to sell at the county fair. So she's in this meeting with these 2 individuals, and my secretary comes and says, Mary, you need to go in there and use your conflict resolution and mediation skills because they're about to eat poor Amanda alive. I went into the room with her and took on the role of mediation and started trying to take on the mediation, asking what they saw their problem as and what their interests were. And it was like magic when I was able to articulate back to the mad dad what his interest was. When he heard that it had been heard and recognized, he actually started crying at this time. It was such an emotional conflict for him. And once his interest was articulated, we were able to resolve the conflict. The rules didn't change. The rules were adhered to. And it was very interesting for me to observe how Amanda, because we did this mediation and went to the interest and the perception in the conflict. She has been able to have a really good working relationship with this young 4-H'er and this family. And I think it's because we used masterful conflict resolution techniques in approaching that particular conflict. I share that because I think it's important for us in Extension to realize that we're here to help one another, and that it's a good idea to start calling in on our peers when we are in a conflict in the workplace. Conflict avoidance has some certain looks to it. It takes part of that fight or flight that we've heard that happens when we are perceiving that we're in danger. It's a process of ignoring or postponing conflict, and so let's just kind of look at some of the temporary measures that we might be employing if we are tending to avoid the conflict in our workplace. And I want to begin this session with letting you know that when I started in Extension, my preferred conflict style was to avoid it. I didn't like conflict, I avoided it, and I found that I was always in conflict. And it made my work satisfaction extremely frustrating. So these were some of the behaviors that were at play. Accommodation. If we are in a session of avoiding conflict, we may be finding that we're starting to accommodate a party, because it's a way of trying to simmer the conflict, or, if I just let them have this, then maybe they'll start arguing with me about that problem. An avoidant person using that strategy is trying to win favor with the person and not address the problem. Within accommodation, there's also a couple of more nuances to be kind of mindful of, and that is we acquiesce, and that's a way of avoiding conflict. So it's a temporary fix. We may be setting ourselves up for a future conflict. And what was happening in my situation years ago is, well, you never say anything when they make the contest in favor of their kid winning. So I was acquiescing to the older leaders to have their way because they apparently knew more than I did about the horse show at the fair. And I was setting myself up for future conflicts. Acquiescing, though, I want to point out, is a tool that can help us to pick our battles. And that is part of wisdom in the workplace, is to know what battles we need to take on and what ones we can actually ignore. Another symptom that you'll see that you have conflict in the workplace is that you see distancing and stonewalling. There's nonverbal clues that are at play here. I'm sure you've all seen it. We don't answer phone calls. We avoid being in the same room with someone. We avoid meetings. We don't look at them, avoiding eye contact. There may be changing topics or subjects happening by other people that are buying into the conflict that's happening between two people. Stonewalling means that I'm ignoring another party or I'm ignoring their request for a change. It's the opposite of accommodation. It occurs when a person deliberately avoids and refuses to interact with the person with whom they feel conflicted. By stonewalling, that other person is feeling that they're retaining some type of power over the circumstance, and stonewalling also gives the individual an opportunity to refuse to allow that other person to have a say in the situation. And it will go on. The stonewalling and distancing will go on until the conflict is escalated to where it has to be addressed. The other behavior we may see if we are avoiding conflict is that we are choosing to become a people pleaser. We do something nice, or we are very overly solicitous as a way of avoiding conflict. I've observed this with people that we see or perceive that have important positions in our communities, and avoid having to confront them. We just can't say enough nice things about them or do enough nice things for them because we don't want to deal with. Here's an example. We have a 4-H leader who is politically involved in the community, and they have some bullying going on in their club that they aren't addressing and just choosing to ignore it. and letting everyone know what a wonderful person this leader is and how lucky we are that we have this very important person involved in our program. Or we may use lighthearted conversations and make jokes about things to avoid addressing the conflict at hand. The bottom line is, if we want to retain our professional integrity, we all need to learn how to live comfortably with the fact that there are going to be people who simply aren't going to like us or who don't want to be around us. And we want people in our programs who are going to respect us for taking the high road, enforcing our policies, being fair, having level playing fields, and using people-pleasing behavior to avoid having to address conflicts with people that we perceive are more powerful than us isn't a healthy place to be in the workplace. Winston Churchill once said, "You have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something sometime in your life." The great leaders in history, it seems, have been adept by going forward in spite of having political enemies. They willingly speak their minds and stand up for what they believe, even when it gets others alienated. But most of us just want to limit how we speak out because we're so fearful that people may not like us. And we've learned to have these people-pleasing behaviors at a very young age. We smile when we're not happy. We choose to say nothing when we should say something. And to have a program, in particular here in Wyoming, where we look at our 4-H program being around the pillars of character, we have to be mindful about when it's time to speak up and when we need to do the right thing and stand the course. Another thing you'll see in conflict avoidance in the workplace is competition. Now, an individual may choose to be competitive with the person they're having the conflict with because that is a way to overcome that individual. So, I'm going to be first at it, or I'm going to get there first and then they won't dare say anything, or I'm going to invite these people and then they won't be able to invite those people. You get this competition for resources, competition for time, competition for space or location, and it's actually concealing one's goals and interests kind of by openly attacking in a working kind of a way the person we are conflicted with. So by doing this, the aggressor is ignoring the value of negotiating and working towards a compromise or a win-win solution in the workplace. There are consequences to us if we are choosing to avoid conflict in the workplace. And let's look at some of the consequences that might be coming our way. There will be perpetual bad behavior. If you are constantly avoiding conflict with a certain coworker, a friend, or a volunteer in your program who may be doing or saying things that you don't agree with, the people in question are never going to see your perspective or even think that they should be, they're not going to even realize that there's something that they're doing that is wrong or inappropriate. They aren't going to understand that we have a problem with it unless we speak up with it. For example, if a coworker makes an unkind remark that you don't like, and you don't take the coworker aside and say, that's a comment that hurts my feelings or upsets me, they aren't going to know that it's something that has offended you. The same type of thing happens with our volunteers when they're working with the young people. If we don't tell them that that's not a behavior that we allow, they aren't going to know any different. You look at the research about bullying. It tells us that bullies have a need to control. And so we continue to see the bullying kind of behavior, or as I call it, the person with the big stick coming in, slapping the desk, until we say that's a behavior that isn't acceptable. It was something I dealt with early on in my career. I had a couple of volunteers in our 4-H program that would just come in and stand and bang their fists on the desk and scream at me. And I backed off and they got their way. And until that behavior was told that wasn't acceptable any longer, that is what I kept seeing repeated. Another thing we'll see is there's the unintended consequence of depression. When conflict occurs, it's signaling to us that there's something inside of us that starts forming the hormones that put us into that fight or flight response. And when we are in a situation that's prolonged, that is not getting resolved, it not only has a negative consequence on the workplace, it has a negative consequence on us personally, and probably even a negative consequence on those that are close to us at home. So the unintended consequence is actually our personal peace and our personal health being affected. When we are depressed, we are less confident, we are less effective, we may not care that anyone we may think that no one cares about what's happening, and it just becomes a cycle that leads us to a negative end that isn't necessary. Another negative consequence that can come from conflict avoidance, and this is an interesting concept, but if I am choosing to be if I'm in a department and there's a conflict and I'm not saying anything, I'm choosing to avoid it. Well, when the decision is being made on how a problem might be fixed or addressed, I may not even be included in the committee to address it because I've never said anything. And so I may have a really good idea about how we should fix this, and because I've chosen to not enter a comment into the circumstances, I'm excluded from being meaningfully involved in how an organization is going to be deciding a new course of action or a new procedure. So meaningful growth can only take place through disclosure of my thinking to others, and also my willingness to get feedback from others. Oops. We'll start seeing that we'll have passive-aggressive behavior. Those who avoid conflict will use passive-aggressive behavior as a defense mechanism to cope with helplessness that comes from being unable to confront. Passive-aggressive behavior is an indirect way of expressing one's emotions. It's not pleasant to be in a workplace where you're working with someone that's passive-aggressive. You don't know what's going to come at you next, and it's a constant walking on eggshells, and that's a consequence of avoiding conflict. It weakens our organization. When employees are having chats about this problem I'm having with so-and-so, it decreases our productivity and our creativity. Conflict avoidance hinders collaboration, and it also hinders teamwork. Time that is spent plotting how to one-up or to deal with so-and-so is time away from working in a thriving and healthy environment. Thank you, Jerry. You're right. I don't ever get accused of not saying anything anymore, but I do know there are folks that I have worked with in this community in other agencies that have had decisions come down in the department, and they were very disappointed they hadn't spoken up about the conflict because they probably had an idea that was a better solution to what came about. And were just excluded from the decision-making process because they chose to be avoiding it. Clientele, the thing that I put out, the unintended consequences, our clientele don't have to belong to our organizations. There are so many choices that are out there. And frankly, our clientele don't have to come into hostile work environments or unpleasant offices. They can access information in so many different ways anymore. So it could be a very unintended consequence of not dealing with the conflict that we have in our workplace, in that we are actually weakening our whole organization. And from a county perspective, you want to have, I believe the strength of the extension system is solid county or area programming where the rubber meets the road, and really good and healthy connections to the resources that we need from our state specialists and our area specialists. Together we're strong. Individually we can only do what one can do, and that's not really enough in this day and age to meet the needs of our people. So let's look here at conflict, the cycle. Conflict avoidance will lead to negative and unhealthy relationship. If you see here in the center, let me see if I can find a pointer here. We have the anger and the frustrations, and if I veer off over to avoid and put my head in the sand, the conflict is going to come back around with more anger and frustrations because the needs and issues or interests aren't being addressed, and it escalates. Within conflict resolution, we can choose to engage by dominating, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But hopefully we are an organization or having a culture in our organizations where we have a system to look at the conflict, to engage in it, and to try to resolve it, and to take the steps necessary to create resolution that follows the hallmarks of good decision making. I think I may have just... So here we want to look at, these are some questions to ask yourself. These are what a professional coach friend of mine asks in regarding conflict style. So think about it. Do you respond to conflict situations by running to hide or looking for a fight? Do you apologize over and over even when you know you are right? The proverbial, I'm so sorry, the helpless person. That's a way of avoiding conflict. Have you ever been disappointed working really hard and no one thanks you? We have personal needs that need to be met, and if we are someone that needs affirmation or feedback in the workplace, we should have a healthy enough environment where we are getting the feedback that we need to be continually improving. Are you afraid to tell your boss or coworkers the truth about how you feel? And so if these are the kinds of questions, whatever your answers might be, would be ways to help you think about your conflict addressing strategies. A few points that are worth reiterating before I proceed to strategies to cease avoiding conflict in the workplace. Conflict is more than just a disagreement. It's a situation in which people perceive a threat, and that threat is physical, emotional, could be power, financial, to their status, to their well-being, or to their way of life. The reason for the conflict is meaningful to the people that are involved in it, and it shouldn't be something that we shrug off as something, well, it's going to pass or that's not important. If it's important, if it's a concern to them, it's something that may be something we need to be paying attention to. Participants in conflict will tend to respond on the basis of their perceptions. Remember, we went through the list of those perceptions. But we also need to remember that all conflicts have a substance, something substantive about them, something procedural and or psychological. And that will help us as we're looking at trying to get our hand on what we are wanting to do or how we might be able to avoid that conflict. I believe that conflicts are normal experiences within the work environment. When I first started working in Extension, I thought if there was conflict, it was bad, I was a failure, and I didn't want to share that with my supervisors. I had a lot of conflict. You have no idea the kind of conflict I had when I first moved here. We had leaders that would fight each other, fisticuffs, would sabotage contests so their kids could win over another kid. And it was just a culture that really wasn't very healthy. And with the support of Extension's administrations, I worked through a lot of those conflicts. But I honestly have to say it was John Denver's personal coach that turned the light bulb on for me. I went to a Wyoming Stock Growers Convention here in Jackson, and the workshop was on the dance of conflict. And his program talked about choosing how we address conflict and choosing to see conflict as an opportunity for change and choosing to see that in crisis and in danger we have a choice. And when I finally realized that there were skills that I could learn that could help me become more masterful in conflict, it became an aha, and conflict has become the whole field of conflict resolution has become a passion for me. It's a style. There's management styles in conflict that we can learn, and I'm hoping that if anything you can take away here today is that you're learning that I can start learning to pick and choose styles that I'm going to take for the various conflicts that I might be finding in the workplace. I'm just hoping that we move away from the one that I sometimes used to see a lot of. It's like aggression. Okay, guys, come on in here. I got you right where I want you, and I'm going to bowl right over the top of you. It's my way or the highway. We want to have a models of conflict addressing in our workplace that are effective to a collaborative approach to problem solving. In Extension in Wyoming, we are divided in initiatives. The Community Development Initiative has mediation as one of its core competencies. So my colleagues in community development work in the field of mediation and conflict resolution. And we are, as community development educators, more than willing to work with our colleagues. As I mentioned, I sat down and helped one of our 4-H agent work through her conflict. So we don't have to be alone in it. And hopefully there's going to be a way that we can build and mentor each other in how we can come through the conflicts in our lives as winners. I'm going to offer you some strategies here in closing today that come from the Office of Quality Improvement and the Office of Human Resource Development at the University of Wisconsin. We don't want to let mean-spirited remarks enter into our minds. They do. I mean, people say things that hurt. Not everyone can prevent themselves from saying something that they wish they hadn't during the heat of a moment. And I guess I've learned that I want people to grant me the permission or give me the grace of my best intentions, not necessarily my stupid comments. So I let my perception filters, my biases, and my triggers of you should never have said that to me. What people say in the conflict, we need to be willing just to forgive and forget. But I wanted to share with you that we want to create a personally affirming environment. We need to have enough sleep, enough exercise. We need to eat well enough that we ourselves are able to enter into conflict resolution in a way that works. When I was first starting with leadership development programs, James Watt, who was the Secretary of the Interior with President Reagan, lived here in Jackson. And he came and spoke to one of our leadership institutes, and something I took away that he shared was, if you are working in the public arena, the most important lesson that he had learned at the national level was that you have to take care of yourself. You have to get the sleep you needed to be thinking properly, because you can never unsay something. And so that is something we want to know ourselves and to take care of ourselves. We need to, secondly, clarify personal needs that are threatened by the dispute. Remembering to stay on the subject. When I mediate, it's one of the things that we do, and I mean it's part of anybody mediating, is you try to get to what is the core of the problem, or what is the issue that we are addressing, and we try to stick to it. Remembering that conflicts have substance, procedure, and psychological needs, but we want to look for the baton, that is the best alternative to this negotiated agreement. So what is the best that I can expect if we don't come to a negotiated agreement? If we start learning to think about that as we're approaching or entering into the conflict, it kind of helps us to know what direction we're wanting to go, to identify our desired outcomes that we're hoping to come out of this conflict with. Some of the other things that we hear in conflict resolution or in mediation is, what is the worst that you could expect to come out of this encounter? And then there's also what is the most likely alternative to happen if we don't address this problem. But we're looking for what's the best solution that could come out as we're going into it. Think about what would happen if I don't do it, and what's most likely to continue if we just don't address the problem. So the third strategy is to identify a safe place for negotiation. I know that in Extension, our poor 4-H colleagues, when they're in the middle of the heat of the county fair and they're now at the sheep show and you've got a mad dad and they want to take on the conflict right there in the arena in front of the entire fair audience, that is not a safe place to have a negotiation. So we want to find appropriate places, and it's not inappropriate to say, now is not the time, let's meet in 20 minutes here and we will discuss this. We want to, and that needs to be mutually consented, but we don't want to be put in the spot to have to publicly resolve a conflict with people involved in it that aren't necessarily people that are involved, that are just there spectators. It's also a good tool to start looking for support people, using facilitators or mediators or even an advocate. We don't have to do it all ourselves. It's wonderful to be able to bring in a neutral third to help us if we have something that we need, a stance that we need to be protecting or a rule that we need to be administering, that perhaps there is a way that a neutral third could be used to help us to safely find that safe place for negotiation. And always in a conflict, to begin with an agreement on the ground rules. And there's lots of ground rules that the community development folks could give you if you aren't familiar with creating ground rules, but some of them are, we use iMessages, we're going to stay on topic, we're going to speak one at a time, and whatever those, to begin with ground rules is a place where you've at least begun with an agreement on something. A fourth stance is to listen in the interaction. Emotion will always cloud reason. We want to become active listeners because listening is supportive, and actively listening and then also allowing silence, because if we can allow those silent breaks and allow the storm to somewhat pass before we stick our oar in it, it's a helpful place to learn, or a tool to learn to use in the conflict. I don't have to resolve the conflict this instant. I need to, and I can do this when it's mutually agreed upon. That will work for us. When we are engaged in active listening, we are able to light upon the issue, the need, or the concern that is underneath the conflict, and we can discern whether it is a real or a perceived threat, and then we can move into solutions or changes. I'm currently reading a book by Bruna Martenzuni, who has written the book, The Leader is Mensch. Become the kind of person you want others to follow, or you want others to follow. That's what it's called. The Leader is Mensch. Become the kind of person others want to follow. She writes that there are many benefits to practicing humility, and she maintains that humility is the root of a great leader. And what she was describing the humility piece in her book on struck me as it's the essence of what successful active listeners do. But she writes that there are many benefits to practicing humility, to be in a state of non-pretense, which is what I kind of think active listening is. I'm not presuming to know what you're thinking or saying. I'm trying to understand what it is you're saying. And Martinuzzi says that humility improves relationships across all levels. It reduces anxiety. It encourages openness. And paradoxically, it enhances one's self-confidence. A fifth stance is to assert your needs clearly and specifically. If we can start learning to use iMessages as tools for clarifications, and then we also want to build from what we've heard and to continue to listen well. If we have a bottom line beyond which we cannot move, I mean, you cannot show in this livestock sale if you have not done A, B, C, and that's clearly lined out, that is the bottom line beyond which we cannot, that's where we have to stand. But we can get to the needs, the interests, and the concerns to help people understand that we have to adhere to the rules, but we do hear and understand what their concern is, and maybe there are corrective actions that we can take in the future so we don't wind up in this position again. I think that in extension work, or in particularly when we're working with young people and parents, and what I really love about the pillars of character that are used in our program is that there is a bottom line that we have for our personal ethics and values that we need to adhere to. And our programs are stronger for having the courage to do that, to be able to speak in our needs clearly and specifically. The sixth strategy is to approach problem solving with flexibility. If we can identify issues clearly and concisely, and we can be open to tangents that they might have, but also to other ways that the current situation is being defined. And the other tool that's very helpful is to start trying to come up to clarified criteria that we're going to be using for the decision making. And one of the criteria, maybe, the example could be that our rules are ABC. These are criteria that we have to use, and then we move forward from that in the problem. How do we manage impasse? We want to do that with calm. We want to be patient and be respectful and allow people to process what is being said and to understand what the bottom lines are, to clarify their feelings, but we also be able to clarify what our rules are. We focus on underlying needs, interests, and concerns. And if we need to, take a structured break. Say, let's break for 15 minutes, or let's break and come back tomorrow. You can think about it. Breaks are really helpful. Unless it's a life and death situation, we don't have to address this conflict this instant. So allow the process, the time that's needed, and having an openness about we're trying to create a solution here is going to help us get the skill to get through avoiding to where we're going to address the conflict rather than just sticking our head in the sand and hoping it'll be better next time. And we want to build an agreement that works. Finally, this is the 8th step. There are hallmarks to a good agreement, and that is it fair? Do all parties feel that the agreement is fair and reasonable? Are the action steps realistic? Is the agreement going to be something that, is it balanced? Do we all feel that we have a stake in a role in its implementation, and it's a balanced agreement? Another hallmark of a good agreement is that it's realistic. The action steps are something that we can do. The agreements are specific enough so that we are able to proceed. We know this is what we have to do, and these are what the rules are. This is what we're going to proceed with. Or next year, our rules are going to clarify this so we don't have this question this year again. To what degree is the agreement self-enforcing? Or are we agreeing that, we're going to make this agreement and we're going to tell Mary that she has to do this? If we're relying on somebody else who's not present, it's not going to be a very effective agreement. So when we're going into the conflict resolution, we need to make sure that the parties that are involved are the right parties at the table, and that it isn't a self-enforcing agreement that we're making. Early in my career, I had a lot of agreements that were being made on things that I was going to do for people or changes I was going to make to the program. And as I've learned to develop better communication skills in conflict, that never happens here anymore. And our agreements are future-oriented. It's something that is going to improve the program. It's something that we can look forward to and feel that we've empowered all of us to have ownership in how we're going to proceed to move forward in the workplace. And then we evaluate it. We implement the agreement that we've made. We evaluate that this is working, and we live and learn. And those are the hallmarks to it. The final thing I wanted to say is that organizations that see disagreements as opportunities and resolve them effectively stand out for their strong capacity for innovation and change. A lot of the organization gurus that are writing books about improving your organization talk about how important it is to address conflict and to address disagreements. We need to remember that we are members of the same team, and that asking for help in a conflict is not a sign of weakness. It demonstrates the strength of teamwork. I, for years, have done a program that I call Give Yourself a Rose. And I want to end with allowing you this opportunity just to think about using this tool. In work, we get compliments for having done good work, provided good service to individuals. And what I try to do is when that comes, Mary, thank you so much for that excellent resource, or thank you for helping me solve this problem. I liken that to a rose that I'm putting in a bouquet. And then on days when I feel like I can't do anything right and I have people that are unhappy about whatever they're unhappy about, and it's conflict I'm going to be needing to enter into, because remember, my preferred style is to avoid it. I go back to my rose bouquet and remember that I'm okay, I'm capable, I'm able, I do good things. And that helps me have the courage to step into it in the dance of conflict. And I have discovered over the years that avoiding conflict is likened to being miserable at work. It's more miserable to avoid the conflict in the long run than it is to have the courage to enter into the dance and look at how we can address this and move forward successfully. I am so thankful that you were all able to join me. I hope this was helpful. If you would like these slides, we will be posting the program, and we'll get you that information if you would be so kind as to send Bill an email at weston@uwyo.edu. Thank you.
That was some really good content, Mary. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Bill, thank you for helping me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to try and figure out why those two people couldn't call in. I had the same issue with Lucy the other day, but she had sent out the wrong number to some people, so we thought that was the reason, but maybe we've still got an issue we've got to try and figure out.
And then may I ask, I clicked on a button here accidentally. Are you seeing the list of the slides or just seeing the major slide?
I'm seeing the major slide. It says Mary Martin. It's your last slide.
Well, I guess it was a serendipitous mistake because it's kind of helpful to see what's coming up next. It gives you the scroll of your whole presentation.
Oh, okay.
It highlights where you're at in it. And I didn't realize that was something we could do. So I'm glad I accidentally. It was the little it's the little icon on the bottom that has the little squares in it.
Yeah, I see that. I just did it. Yeah, okay. That's good.
Oh, I see. Listening from Alabama.
We are having a private conversation.
Oh, I guess the class could have. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we stopped. Sandy, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just send your email to me at weston@uwyo.edu if you're wanting the recording, because I'll have to get the file set up.
Oh, Bill, so are you intending to post the recording later then on eXtension?
Yeah, we haven't worked all of that out yet, but we're hoping to get it posted, and if not, I'll be able to send you the file.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you my email address then, just in case. And
all right.
And hopefully we could, I mean, just as an attendee and one of the community practice members at eXtension, I hope that we can get it out there. So I really do think some of this content will be really valuable, just across eXtension too, and the communities of practice. So hoping we can give them access to it as well.
Yeah, it's we're kind of new with this link system. We just made a transfer, and so our web people are also kind of new to it. We can publish it to a WMV file that plays with Window Media Player, and so that's probably the format that we'll want to try and post it in.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So you're just trying to figure out technically, how to make that happen.
Right.
All right. Cool.
Right.
And we'll be happy to share it with you. It's a great suggestion. So if you don't see it, let us know, because I'm happy to send you it too.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Hopefully, did my email address come up in the chat at all?
Jerry,
No.
this is Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
It did.
Okay. Good. Yeah, because I got some feedback from the application that suggested maybe it didn't get delivered for some reason. Just Sandy Puckett.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not sure what that's about. All right. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for the presentation today. Great stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to sign out, Bill. Talk to you later.
Okay. Talk to you later.